Mockingbird. This wasn't a weird pairing because it was so much really bad or anything, it was just more weird because it was pretty random. Although these two had some fun moments, most fans felt that there just wasn't much staying power between them. Also, Spider-Man is a major jokester, and Mockingbird seemed to actively dislike laughing at Peter's jokes. She's pretty no nonsense. The nice thing is that Peter didn't have to worry about Bobby when it came to her being strong, independent, and being able to take on any baddies who might come her way because of her attachment to Spider-Man. In the end, however, everyone kind of felt the relationship was more of a placeholder, something for now but not for forever, as these two both had much more memorable and well-suited pairings when it came to the world of comics matchmaking. And there's also that weird thing of, they don't really have much in common besides their work, so there's that. Number 9. Mary Jane Watson. I know, how could Mary Jane make the list again, you might wonder. You're like, Amanda, really, Mary Jane? Which Spider-Man is she paired with now that's so weird, you wonder? Well, once again, I am not talking about her relationship with Peter Parker, although if we really wanted to explore some of their alternate relationships from alternate Earths and some specific moments in their relationship, there are a few times that even those two have been weird together. But no, this time around we are talking about Mary Jane Watson and Spider-Woman Jessica Drew. When did this happen? Where did this happen? In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610. The two weren't ever officially together, but Jessica definitely had feelings for MJ as she shared the memories, thoughts, and emotions even of Peter Parker, who she was a clone of. Yeah, in Ultimates, Jessica Drew has a different origin story, and like Ben or Kane are on Earth 616, she herself is also a clone of Peter, just a female clone, who was created by Dr. Kurt Connors and Dr. Otto Octavius for the CIA and FBI. The weird thing was less that Jessica was attracted to MJ, and more that she was attracted to her because of Peter's memories. None of her memories were her own, because that's how cloning works in this reality apparently. And before we move on to our next spot, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already and if you're enjoying it. Because yeah, weird things deserve likes, I think. Number 8. Carly Cooper. Carly ended up basically hating Spider-Man after being in a relationship with him, which was pretty unfortunate considering that she was a fan favorite when it came to her relationship with Peter. Carly was very patient with Peter initially and didn't even seem to mind when Peter would kinda zone out when they were together and not even notice when she left a gathering early, which is pretty awkward. She worked as a forensic specialist for the New York Police Department, so they seemed like a logical match. Both were brainy and involved in the fight for justice. However, when Peter Parker revealed that he was Spider-Man, Carly found herself unable to continue their relationship, and the two broke up. However, Carly would still be haunted by this revelation and secret, which she fought very hard to protect. It eventually caused her to move away from New York for a time after a traumatic event where she found herself exposed to the Goblin formula and transformed, being given the name Monster and recruited into the Goblin King's Goblin Army. Carly was later cured, but this experience would definitely stay with her. Number 7. Eddie Brock and Liz Allen. A romance that never really amounted to anything other than Eddie trying to make a move on Liz, who pretty much just always rejects him. This attempt at a romance was made even weirder too when Venom revealed their jealousy of Liz, although I get it, they want Eddie all to themselves. Why bother with Liz when Eddie has a perfectly good romantic partner in Venom? The whole thing is pretty weird though, Venom feeling the need to compete with Liz for Eddie's attention, when really, who has more of Eddie's time than Venom themselves? They basically have a monopoly on it. They spend most of their time bonded to the guy, but the whole exchange here is made even more strange by the fact that Liz doesn't really reciprocate Eddie's romantic interest to begin with. So there isn't that much even for Venom to be jealous of, other than I guess Eddie's wandering eye. Venom's like, Eddie, I see your eyes wandering and just look at me. Just look at your symbiote. Look at yourself in the mirror, basically. Number 6. Rogue. So this isn't main continuity Spider-Man or Rogue, but it's still a romantic moment that happened between the two characters, just on the Earth of 161. The two teamed up together in X-Men Forever 2. Rogue at the time had the guise of Nightcrawler, but still sports her very familiar brown and white hair. When Spider-Man encourages her to follow her heart, she warns him that she just might do that, sugar, and leans in to kiss him. I know what you're thinking, a kiss with Rogue could be deadly, but here Rogue was led to believe that she actually would be able to kiss Spider-Man without hurting him, so no worries there, don't panic. However, the romantic rooftop moment was then interrupted by Jean's telepathic shouts for Rogue's assistance. Those telepathic romance blocks, you know what I mean? Jean's like, help, Rogue's like, it's not a good time.
At number 5, we've got Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. This face-off has such a crazy build-up that it actually needs its own issue called, you guessed it, Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. They fight because Spider-Man finds himself caught up in an ongoing operation that Wolverine had been a part of for a long time before the events of this story. And it's, like I said, it's a long story, but basically this woman named Charlemagne is in such a predicament involving Russian assassins and basically an internal manhunt for her arrest. So she actually asks Wolverine to end it for her, to save her from going to a gulag. Spider-Man notices Logan is about to actually make her wish come true. He swoops in, and this is the last straw for Logan. This fight takes place in a graveyard of all places, leaving the two superheroes in a stalemate, each of them seriously threatening to end each other's life. But luckily the fight is broken up at the exact moment by a chopper with its spotlight on, and as this distraction has both of them gripped, someone creeps up on Spidey, who senses it and delivers a brutal punch. But unfortunately it wasn't Wolverine. Instead it was the woman he'd been trying to save, and the punch kills her. I mean, don't be too hard on yourself, Spidey, it's what she wanted, right? And even Logan acknowledges that she probably planned it that way. Okay, at number 4, it's the battle between Thor and Beta Ray Bill. This battle is pretty epic considering it's the fight that would determine whether or not Beta Ray Bill is worthy of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. He'd already shown his worth by actually being able to pick it up, but that wasn't enough, as Thor fights back against his new contender. The battle rages into a river of lava, leaving both warriors exhausted, lying on an obsidian raft. But they float steadily towards a lava fall, waterfall made of lava, you know what I mean. Beta Ray Bill shows his worth further by saving an unconscious Thor from the deadly plunge. After all is said and done, the two warriors end in a draw, approaching Odin with the results. And instead of taking away Thor's hammer and handing it over to Bill, Odin offers him a brand new weapon called Stormbreaker. So it turns out okay in the end. But this is a battle for the history books, with two of the most powerful superheroes in the whole Marvel Universe facing off for the glory of respect and worthiness. Alright, here we are at number 3 with Captain America versus Iron Man, or just the Civil War storyline. I'm gonna match those two into one because they're basically the same conflict. But Iron Man and Captain America have had a deep bond for quite some time, but there are some times when they have disagreements that turn into physical altercations. One of these fights takes place in the Armor Wars storyline when Tony Stark learns that his own technology has been stolen to create super soldiers. And when Captain America sees a chance to preserve the armor, Iron Man gets a bit physical since he wants the technology to stay exclusively to him. So Iron Man knocks out Cap with an electrical charge and leaves the room. But this altercation doesn't even compare to the fight they have during the Civil War event, which we all know has Iron Man and Captain America pitted against each other in their own factions. When Captain America goes in for a handshake in Civil War issue 3, he leaves an electron scrambler on Tony's hand, which immobilizes his whole suit, leaving him on the ground while the rest of the team faces off. But Tony isn't done and gets up to land a massive blow on Steve, tearing his mask and nearly severing his jawbone. It's sad to see old friends fight like this, but it definitely makes for a pretty exciting read. At number 2, we've got Batman vs. Superman. This turn of events is so impactful on the storyline we're used to that it was turned into a movie. These two had a relationship so tight they were like brothers, who sometimes fought. But most of the time these fights would be due to mind control, like in the Hush storyline when Superman is brainwashed by Poison Ivy and sent to attack Batman. But we all know the fight that really puts these two near the top of our list is the one in Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. This storyline, set in the future, depicts an older, more brutal Batman who is wreaking havoc against crime in Gotham. And when the government notices Batman acting out of sorts, they send Superman after him to put a stop to it. And this fight is epic. What really makes it cool is that you'd expect a human Batman to be totally outmatched by the Kryptonian alien Superman, but the matchup is more even than you'd expect. And it ends with the two in what seems like almost a draw. But that's where I'll leave it for the few of you who don't know what happens still. Needless to say, it's a pretty insane face-off, but I think it's fair to say that the world is better off with these heroes on the same side. Okay, finally at number 1, there's Avengers vs. X-Men. This showdown has happened before this new event coming out soon, it just didn't involve the Eternals. And of course the context will most likely be different. But in the original Avengers vs. X-Men event, the disagreements start with the two factions having opposing views on how to approach dealing with Phoenix Force. On one hand, the X-Men think the Phoenix Force will bring a rebirth to mutant species, a cause they have always felt very passionate about. But The Avengers are concerned that Phoenix Force will basically wipe out all life on Earth. When 5 of the X-Men are possessed by the Force, the battle then becomes more complicated, with this third team now involved. And what's good about this is that the Phoenix Five then become a common enemy between the remaining X-Men and the Avengers, who start trying to take them out one by one. Eventually, it's just Cyclops with the Phoenix Force in him, and he basically gets turned into full-blown Dark Phoenix, putting an end to the fighting between the Avengers and the X-Men. Because you don't really have time to fight each other when there's a Dark Phoenix with a laser vision flying around.
Number 10. Morgan Le Fay. Oddly enough, these two in a way seem almost perfectly suited for one another. Of course, this only means that their relationship is made even more weird. Doom and Morgan Le Fay became lovers over time, forming a relationship during a time when Morgan Le Fay was training and teaching Doom in the arts of magic. Doom enjoyed their lessons, and I assume also enjoyed spending time with Morgan, but when she asked him for a gift from the future to prove his loyalty and his love, Doom refused, giving Morgan the excuse that doing so would, disrupt the timeline. Morgan didn't like this very much and set out traveling through time to the future in order to destroy Doom. Initially, she planned to kill Doom when he was young and vulnerable, but was not satisfied with the fact that Doom would kinda then not know the reason behind her wrath. In the end, her confrontation of Doom resulted in a battle with Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, and while Morgan very much messed up that team, she was ultimately defeated by Doom during the fray. Not the most healthy of relationships, and strange that that's the least weird one. Just keep that in mind. That's number 10, that's the starting point. Number 9. Enchantress. I mean, it makes sense for Doom to be with magical ladies, but it's also pretty weird when you consider that Doom before has gone out of his way in the past to show how little he cares for Enchantress, and how little he feels any attraction to her, despite her being considered as one of the most beautiful beings in the world, the epitome of femininity. But you know Doom, he likes what he likes, and even then he probably won't treat who he likes great, and is likely just using them for some other gains. Still, Doom and Enchantress ended up getting married on the alternate Earth 9811, where everyone remained stranded on Battleworld, and even had a son together there. However, not even them having a son together or being wed could save Enchantress, as Doom still murdered her, and evaded his son's attempt to kill him using magic he had learned from his dead wife. Wow, that is all kinds of messed up. And before we move on to this next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you are enjoying it, and if you just want even more weird romance in your life. Who doesn't want more weird romance in their life, am I right? Number 8. Sue Storm. This one isn't that weird once we delve into what really prompts Doom to seek a relationship with women, but it is weird because of basically all of those reasons. Meaning, it might not seem weird to Victor that he has a certain attraction to Sue, but it's definitely weird in general. Some have speculated that Doom simply wants to offer Sue Storm more, like Reed's other rival for Sue's affections, Namor the Submariner. But it's more likely that Doom only wants Sue because of the power that she represents, and because he knows how much it would destroy Reed Richards. Still, overall, Doom has a pretty weird relationship and complex feelings, it seems, at times for both the Invisible Woman and the rest of the Fantastic Four family besides. Let's also just talk about how awkward it was when God Emperor Doom made Susan his wife when he created a new world out of the tattered pieces of the multiverse following the incursions, cause there's always that to go back to. And he also made her 2 kids his kids, even though they definitely still looked just like her kids with Reed. What's happening there? Number 7. Elizabeth Tyne. Elizabeth Tyne was initially introduced by the name Janine Godby, which was an alias that she assumed to escape her past. The weird thing about this relationship wasn't so much how it unfolded, though being in a relationship with any clone of a superhero is always going to be weird, but more in how it started, and in Elizabeth's resemblance to another major love interest from Spider-Man comics, Mary Jane Watson. I specifically just want to focus on the weird interactions in the beginning of this relationship though, although it is weird that, Ben Reilly's a clone and then Janine/Elizabeth just happens to resemble Mary Jane. That's pretty weird. Ben Reilly approached Janine initially, and upon their first meeting was taken with her, asking her out in the most bizarre and kind of strangely movie-esque way. He's like, look, I know this is going to sound like a line, but well, I'm new in town. I know that's lame, but I swear it's true. It's just lame that you're using it as a line, Ben. So I'm new in town, and well, I was wondering if maybe we could have, I don't know, dinner tonight? And initially Janine just turns him down, and I think we can see why from that thing that he just said, which is a lot. I feel like Ben also got Peter's awkward charm as well in the cloning process. However, because it is charm, even though it is awkward, Janine immediately changes her mind because, yeah, awkward charm. Ben never makes it to their date, however, because hero stuff, but does run into Janine and apologizes and asks if they can try again. Now, she initially says no once more, and I actually love this like one series of panels so much. I wish that they had just left it there because it's really funny, but she actually adds like right after that he can take her to lunch right now. How spontaneous and romantic and kind of presumptuous, but okay. I also like that he's just like, alright, great, I wasn't doing anything. It's like, that's that were me, I'd probably be like, well, maybe not now, but like maybe in a bit. Number 6. Storm. Again! I know, you're like, wait, didn't we just talk about this? But no, this is different. This one happened in an alternate reality in the Marvel book X-Men/Doctor Doom and the Chaos Engine trilogy, or sometimes referred to as the Cosmic Cube trilogy, on the alternate Earth of 892. Doctor Doom here makes Storm his wife and his co-ruler. She becomes the Empress, whether or not she wants that. They have 2 children together, and we also learn of how intensely creepily protective Doom is of his bride when a guard accidentally witnesses Storm changing, and as punishment, Doom has his eyes gouged out. The strangest thing about this one for me is the first book in the Chaos Engine series came out in 2000, whereas Storm was encased in chrome during her weird kidnapping date thing with Doom in 1981 in issue 145 of X-Men, implying to me that Stephen A. Roman, who wrote the Chaos Engine trilogy, may have actually been inspired by that strange dinner date to have Doom forcefully marry Storm in this book.
At number 5, we've got Miles Morales versus Miles Morales versus Miles Morales versus Miles Morales? That's right, it's a 4-way battle this time, as just like the original Spider-Man, Miles Morales wound up getting his own clone saga. When a villain known as the Assessor experimented on Miles' spider-modified DNA, he was able to create 3 rapidly aging clones, each with their own quirks and variations on Miles' base powers. Going by the names of Shift, Salim, and Mindspinner, these 3 clones weren't inherently evil, but were dead set on finding a cure to their rapid clone degeneration, a miscommunication that wound up bringing them into conflict with the real Miles Morales. Coming in at number 4, we have Superman versus his 6th-dimensional future self, which just might be the most comic book thing I have ever said out loud. When the entire DC multiverse was at stake due to Lex Luthor and his followers attempting to break the Source Wall and free the Dark Goddess Perpetua, Superman and the Justice League were forced to open a doorway to the mythical 6th dimension, where only the creators of the multiverse could usually exist. After passing through the doorway, Superman seemed to return as an older, wiser, and more enlightened version of himself, a hypothetical perfect Superman. However, this all turned out to be a ruse by Perpetua's son, the World Forger, leading to the real Superman and his futuristic doppelganger to battle it out at the very edge of the universe. Man, what a bummer that this guy's awesome beard turned out to not be real after all. At number 3, we've got the original Clone Saga, the story of Peter Parker versus Ben Reilly. For years, the biggest question in all of Spidey comics was, who is the real Peter Parker? The hero we've been following for years, or this new character originally introduced as Ben Reilly? Also going under the name of the Scarlet Spider, these 2 characters would go back and forth from friends to enemies and everything in between, with Ben even taking the main Spider-Man label for a while as they struggled with questions of identity and who was behind their complicated lives. That's some clone drama at its very finest. Coming in at number 2, we have Mr. Fantastic versus the Maker. Now, most fights on this list have been between 2 variants of a character that have only briefly encountered one another, or eventually were able to reconcile their differences. But in the case of the Maker, this is a version of Reed Richards that is just as smart and cunning as his regular heroic self, but using that intellect for his own twisted goals again and again. Not only are these 2 versions of Reed Richards directly opposed to one another, another, but their greatest battles have involved the fate of each of their respective universes, with the maker still dead set on finding a way to restore the Ultimate Universe to its former glory. And finally, at number 1, we have Deadpool vs. Evil Deadpool, a matchup that definitely has the weirdest origin story compared to anyone else on this list. Following an encounter with a love-struck stalker superfan, Deadpool searches her house to discover that she's actually been collecting discarded body parts that he'd lost over the years in her freezer. Weirded out by this turn of events, Deadpool dumps all of the parts into a dumpster, not realizing once they thaw that all of the body parts will Frankenstein together because of his healing factor, forming a new, even more hideous Evil Deadpool. With this Deadpool wanting to accomplish evil feats that even the real Deadpool wouldn't consider, it's not long before the two super violent copies are battling it out.
Number 10. Venom and Clint Barton. Things get pretty weirdly kinky with these two characters in the New Avengers Annual issue number 3 from 2009. Here we see what happens to Clint after he goes after Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers. He is being held as a prisoner and is being interrogated. I don't know if we'd call this so much a romance as a weird, sexy monster moment, but it's definitely notable enough to receive a mention. Here Venom is bonded with Matt Gargan, Hawkeye is naked, and Venom is seen licking him from behind and very loosely and suggestively choking him, while Norman asks him where the other true Avengers are hiding out. It's all very sensual in a way that is odd and to me definitely implies Venom or Mac or some combination basically consider Hawkeye to be a hottie. That's how it's made to look anyways. I can't blame them though, I feel like Clint Barton is definitely a hottie, so yeah. Number 9. Flash Thompson and Valkyrie. This was a relationship that happened during the Secret Avengers when Flash Thompson as Agent Venom was on the team. I know I said I'd be focusing on Eddie Brock and Venom relationships, but this one also technically involves Venom through Flash and is too weird for me to just not include. Also, Flash was Agent Venom for quite a while in the comics, so I feel like we can just definitely count him in. This relationship was more strange because it was just so out of the blue. I don't have anything against it, but even Valkyrie Brunhilde acknowledged the awkwardness and decided to take matters into her own hands by basically jumping Flash Thompson's bones. It was a strange, secret relationship, but I guess what do you expect on the Secret Avengers? Seems oddly fitting, if not a bit abrupt. Alright friends, before we move on to that next point, it's that part of the video where I do the YouTube thing and I say, hey, click this like cause it helps us. But seriously, click this like cause it helps us. Number 8. Venom and Mary Jane. Another strange romance for sure. Venom basically left MJ traumatized when the two first met to the point that she was terrified of them and has had various disturbing experiences with them throughout her history. And yet, this is comics, and histories are long, so pretty much anyone can end up with anyone. Also, this is MJ, and I feel like everyone just wants to ship her with everyone because, I mean, MJ's a hottie, so yeah. These two haven't gotten romantic in the traditional sense, but there have been a few moments where Venom has seemingly pined for Mary Jane, resenting the fact that Eddie always seems to get the girl, despite the fact that he is usually the one messing up those relationships. Which is very strange, especially considering how much Venom seems to pine for Eddie, but anyways. Once again, Venom is definitely a jealous creature by nature, which we've seen time and time again in the comics. We have also seen the symbiote bond with Mary Jane, much to her own chagrin, and despite the likely conflicted feelings of MJ fans at this happening. But yeah, it's a weird and problematic thing, and it's there. So let's just acknowledge it. Storm. How bad is it that Storm isn't even one of the weirdest entries on this list? And her relationship, or date at least, with Doom was pretty weird. Date, kidnapping, it's kind of both. It all went down after Storm was kidnapped by Doom and held prisoner but treated as a guest. He wined and dined Storm, and she was even beginning to think she might be attracted to him. But then he made a terrible move and he messed it all up by encasing her in chrome. Don't do that on a date, that's a bad move. This set off Storm's intense claustrophobia, which she had ever since she was little and found herself trapped under wreckage. Storm reacts by creating a massive storm, one that's implied has the potential, or already has, overtaken the entire planet, putting her on a level of power that is compared to the Phoenix. Doom might think he's a brilliant charmer who can do as he pleases, but he should probably think twice before he messes with Storm. Number 6. Venom and Spider-Man. One of the greatest unrequited love stories of all time. Poor Venom just wanted to bond with Spider-Man, but Spider-Man was having none of it. This was truly a rough time for the symbiote, who just was getting rejected left, right, and center until he fell into the lap of Eddie Brock, who seemed to also share his hatred for Spider-Man, and the two basically encouraged a sense of hate and kind of rage in one another initially because of this negative experience that Venom had originally with Peter Parker. If you don't believe me that this was a romance of sorts, just look at the name of the issue where the two kind of break up more permanently in Web of Spider-Man. The name of the story where the suit attempts to once more bond to Peter unsuccessfully, who shakes it off with the sonic disruptance of some loud bells ringing, is called Till Death Do Us Part. Sounds pretty romantic to me. Definitely some strange, sad, and unrequited love there. Poor Venom, they're always being rejected by Spider-Man, continuously.
Number 5. Spider-Man and the Red Goblin. The Red Goblin. It's a mix between the Green Goblin and Carnage. I mean, you have a combination of two of the most powerful bad guys ever against Peter. He shouldn't have won this, I don't think. Let me explain. Appearing in the Amazing Spider-Man 798, this all came to life after Norman Osborn stole the Carnage symbiote, and after that, all hell just broke loose. He created this monster. So Norman used the Carnage symbiote to eject all the nanites, but then that ended up creating this monster mashup, becoming the Red Goblin. It was like a science experiment that made things worse for everyone, but better for him almost. So the rare weaknesses that the symbiote did have went away once the two had merged, making him like unstoppable. Peter Parker for sure should have lost this battle. I mean, he's so overpowered here. I mean, even the bombs that he throws at Spider-Man are upgraded versions of his own bombs. This time around, the bombs are red Carnage bombs that Pete can't even sense. It's all fused together and it's really intimidating. It's very scary. So Pete seems to agree by his choice of words. Peter admits a few pages later, after he retreats, that he couldn't last 3 minutes in the ring with him. Yeah, I agree. The readers are like, absolutely. You're absolutely right. The final issue had Peter get the upper hand on Osborn by mind games? Yeah, he explains how Carnage will get all the glory here in this defeat of Spider-Man and not Norman Osborn. I mean, ego is a great place to attack. If it works, it works. So when he becomes Norman Osborn again, the fight is manageable now, and Spider-Man can come out on top. Now, as great as this is, I really don't think it would be this easy to turn the tides. Not after some Carnage bombs. Get out of here, no way. Number 4, Batman and the Hulk. Yep, you heard me. So back in the late 70s, Marvel and DC came together for a handful of crossovers. One of these crossovers featured a battle with the Incredible Hulk and Batman. There have been many conversations about who would win in a fight between Iron Man and Batman. If you're a fan of this page, odds are you've had this talk with your friends, because they're both humans who rely on their brains and brawn to get by. Kind of even. Personally, I'd pick Batman to win that fight any day. But the Hulk, no chance. Batman vs. the Hulk, issue 27 of DC Comics Special Series. So we have Batman and the Joker trying to control the Green Giant. And when the Hulk gets his hands on Batman, well, that should have been the end for sure. Even Batman said he felt like his spine was going to snap like a pencil. And believe me, if anybody knows what that feels like, it's definitely Batman. So he gets out of his grasp by a nice double ear smack, and then he finishes him off by using some sleeping gas from his belt, followed by a nice flying kick. Now, it's great to see Batman use his skills to take down the Beast. That's what he's good at. Unfortunately, I don't think any fight between them would ever last long enough to give him the chance to do so, especially if he has him in his hands. He would be dead. Number 3, Iron Man and Magneto. Now, when I say that, your first thought probably is, well, of course Magneto would win a fight fighting a guy in a metal suit, but this wasn't the case during an X-Men vs. Avengers storyline. If you think this is a no contest, you've never met Tony Stark. So Stark gets buried by Magneto under 200 tons of rubble, because even though Tony's suit at this point was made of carbon nanotubes, the island that he was fighting on was made of metal. So step 2 was for Tony to release a swarm of high-tech magnets to try and throw him off his game a little bit. This of course didn't work. You're giving magnets to Magneto, you know? So Magneto tried reaching out to the cosmos to channel power from other planets, but in doing so, he sensed a disruption in the form of the Phoenix Force. So while he was distracted there, Tony took this as an opening and knocked him out. Now, as fun as this was, and it led to other fun things, it was also highly unlikely that Iron Man will beat Magneto again. If this happened on the big screen, fans would rip it apart, no doubt about it. Number 2, Thor and the Incredible Hulk. Thor Ragnarok is easily one of the best installments in the Infinity Saga. Taika Waititi is returning to the studio to do Thor Love and Thunder, and I can't wait. He's super funny. If you haven't seen What We Do in the Shadows, go watch it out. It's his best work, I'd say. And Jojo Rabbit. He makes good movies. So one of my favorite scenes from the movie is also one that makes fans pretty annoyed. Now this part in the movie had to happen so the plot can move a certain way, and we got to see a cool battle take place in the meantime, but it's also kind of unrealistic. So the Grandmaster's great champion, of course, ends up being Thor's friend from work, Hulk. Now he's been there for a while after Sokovia, so he's not the same green guy as they last saw. Thor spent most of the fight getting it handed to him. He was trying to talk to Bruce, trying to calm him down, give him little arm tickles. It wasn't working out. Until he tapped into his true powers and unleashed a good number of lightning bolts to the face. That ought to do it. So Thor is about to finish off Sakar's champion once and for all until the Grandmaster himself intervened. If only he had replaced that remote for like 2 seconds, this movie would have gone a much different route. Maybe less fun, but probably more honest. And finally, number 1, Old Man Logan and the Hulk. I like the Hulk. He shouldn't really lose anything ever. That's the point I'm getting at. Seeing the Hulk fight Wolverine is something I hope we can see on the big screen in my lifetime. I mean, with all these franchises crossing over soon with WandaVision and stuff, maybe it's sooner than we think, but I doubt it. They have no reason to fight yet. But one of the highlight battles between these two beasts take place in Old Man Logan. Now, at the end of the story, Logan went back to finish off Hulk Gang, right? Of course. So soon after the Hulk comes out, they start fighting, even throwing cows at one another. Real wild stuff. Funny, gory, scary, loud, you name it. And then he turns into the big green guy, and boy, does it get ugly. So Billy Bob comes in the cave later on and sees just a mess. He sees bodies all over the floor, and then he sees Hulk struggling with some digestion problems. Odd. So then Wolverine literally rips his way out of his stomach, and that's what kills the Hulk. The Hulk should have won this fight for sure. If he didn't make the mistake of eating him, he probably could have done it. Or the Hulk should have healed after the whole Wolverine C-section thing, so the fight should have maybe continued. I mean, for the story to end this way, it was a little disappointing. Kicking off the list at number 10, Spider-Man, Jester, and Jack-O-Lantern. The MCU's Captain America's Civil War is much more tame than the comic book. I mean, for starters, in the comic, Peter sides with Tony until he realizes that Tony is spying on him, so he switches over to Cap's side. That didn't happen in the movie at all. So in the comic, this causes Stark to send out Jester and Jack-O-Lantern to go and fight Spider-Man. So Peter ended up getting his butt kicked to these guys, and it's all thanks to Stark. There's no chance also that Peter should have lost to them. I mean, imagine if he didn't lose, the entire story would be so different. At first, the two thought taking orders from S.H.I.E.L.D. was a bum deal, as they put it, a bum deal. That is until they got the orders to fight Spider-Man, which they made very clear that they enjoyed doing.
At number 10, we have Cyclops versus Wolverine. In X-Men Schism number 4, a fight breaks out between these two superheroes because of a complex decision on how to face an onslaught of Sentinels unleashed by the world's powers. And as an enormous, seemingly regenerative Sentinel is approaching the two of them, Cyclops insists on allowing the young X-Men to stay and fight, while Wolverine believes it's wrong to put young ones in harm's way. So it's a battle between should we stay and fight or run and regroup. Well, Wolverine gets outranked by Cyclops, but instead of backing down, he goes to their home base and sets 2,000 pounds of explosives to go off at the press of a button to take out the Sentinel and allow for a distraction as they get away. Cyclops is angered by the subordination and decides to take it out on Wolverine as they start to battle it out. And the Sentinel is coming right towards them just to make everything worse. Maybe not the best time to pick an epic fight, guys, but it is a tough call, and both arguments make sense to me in different ways. I guess this stuff just sometimes happens.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Wolverine vs. Wolverine from Marvel's Age of Ultron event. Now, as a mutant that's been cloned once, twice, or even several dozen times, Wolverine is certainly no stranger to having to cross claws with a version of himself. However, the time-traveling shenanigans involved in stopping Ultron's complete takeover of Earth has to be one of the most notable. After making the incredibly difficult decision to travel back in time and kill the creator of Ultron, Hank Pym, Wolverine found out that the new Pymless future he'd created was even worse than the one he'd left, and was immediately attacked by this apocalyptic future's version of Wolverine. Then again, considering the entire reason this version of Earth was now destroyed was partially due to a war with the Skrulls, we can maybe understand why the future Wolverine would be a bit suspicious of any newcomers. At number 9, we have our very first clone of the list, with with the battle between Thor and his cyborg copy, Ragnarok. During the events of Civil War, the real Thor was presumed dead after saving Asgard from destruction. As a means of reinforcing his side of the conflict, Tony Stark wound up using a strand of Thor's hair to create a half-flesh, half-machine clone of the fallen Avenger. A plan that went horribly off the rails when the cloned Thor, dubbed Ragnarok, killed the superhero Goliath and converted many heroes onto Captain America's side. When the real Thor was eventually resurrected, he wasted little time in completely dominating and destroying his copy, proving once and for all who the true God of Thunder is.
Number 9. Batman vs. Guy Gardner. Okay, this one comes from Justice League issue 5, and it's commonly known as the punch. We have a punch and we have a slap. Now it's time to talk about the punch. So in this comic, Batman comes to take over the Justice League International, and Guy Gardner doesn't share the same enthusiasm as the rest of the team. So for more than one issue, he makes it very clear that he doesn't like this new leader. He's not a fan of the Bats. So naturally, a large conflict was growing, although Batman was clearly the better fit for the role. So he challenged Batman to a fight without the use of his power ring. Big mistake. And then Batman proceeded to knock him out with one punch. One punch, one punch. Yes, here we go. Blue Beetle even got pumped about it and started yelling, one punch, one punch. Hence why it's a big thing now. This is an amazing moment, and an even greater lesson rather, but a Green Lantern getting knocked out by a human punch should never happen, ever. Never. Don't start fights you can't win without the ring that makes you a superhero, or else you're just a guy in a suit. Pun intended. Number 8. Bruiser vs. Wolverine. Runaways, issue 12. So we see Logan and Molly Hayes, aka Bruiser, have a rather quick exchange. Now at this time, Wolverine was a member of the New Avengers, and he's trying to get to the bottom of what happened to Dagger. So he, Cap, and Iron Man went to find help from the Runaways, seeing as the signs were leading to Cloak being responsible. So Molly is one of the strongest heroes ever, for sure. But how she handled Wolverine was almost a little bit too easy. So they walk into the cathedral, Cap calmly asks her to stop screaming, and that Wolverine and him are not going to hurt her. Laying the foundation, good. Said very calm, from a very calm man. This is good. The screaming continues, and Wolverine even asks if she's heard of heightened senses, and then gives her 3 seconds to stop drilling a hole into his brain. So he counts 3, 2, and then the next page we have outside face down Logan in the snow. Then when he comes back in, he's quite embarrassed about what just happened, even saying how he won't tell anybody tonight what happened if they don't, as he brushes off some snow.
Next on our list at number 9 is The Thing versus the Hulk. This is a classic showdown that many of you may already be aware of, where Ben Grimm and Bob Banner go at it in the middle of the city streets. Side note, Stan Lee accidentally referred to the Hulk's alter ego as Bob Banner instead of Bruce for a few months before correcting it. Just some trivia for you. Anyway, the reason why they're fighting is basically that the Hulk is going crazy and smashing everything in sight, trying to reach his goal of finding the Avengers to take them down. When the Hulk easily knocks out the Human Torch and holds on to him like a prize at the county fair, the Thing watches by the sidelines wanting to get involved. Then, after Invisible Woman tries to protect the Human Torch with an invisible force screen, she too is rendered unconscious by the Hulk. So the Thing has to take things into his own hands and fight the Hulk himself. The fight goes on for pages and pages, with buildings being knocked down, buses being torn in half. At one point, the Thing drives a boat. It's crazy. Unfortunately, it ends with the crazed Hulk getting the best of Benjamin Grimm, leaving him exhausted both physically and mentally, clambering back to his feet. Alright, at number 8, we've got Superman vs. Shazam. In 1996's Kingdom Come, we witness a fight between these two, initiating at the end of issue 3 and carrying out into issue 4. The reason behind the fight is complicated, but to keep it simple, Shazam has been brainwashed by Lex Luthor, so it's not really him controlling his own actions. But it is a tough thing watching as an aging Superman basically gets beaten up so badly that he almost dies. In this storyline, Superman has the pure intentions of trying to corral a new generation of less than heroic superheroes to help bring peace back to Earth. And with internal resistance on that front, and also these plots by his typical enemies to imprison him, he's really just not ready to defend himself. Not to mention, he's totally caught off guard, and once again, he's older. Luckily, after some serious blows of magical electricity coming from Shazam, Superman is finally able to get through to his alter ego and speak directly to Billy Batson, saving himself, and ultimately a whole lot more from what could have been a game-changing move for Lex Luthor and the others. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of destruction done when Shazam sacrifices himself to detonate an enormous bomb early in the air above the battlefield, saving countless lives. Alright, at number 7, we've got Reed Richards versus Namor. This is a spicy face-off as it's a classic fight of jealousy and competition over a woman's affection. Susan Storm is unconscious in the hospital, and the arrogant and shameless Namor keeps making advances on her right in front of Richard. This escalates to the point where Namor actually makes a move on Susan as she's just barely coming to, and right when Reed enters the room as well. Susan tries to de-escalate the situation, but it's no use due to her injuries and fatigue, so the two heroes go after it. As they rip through the city streets, they throw insults at each other as they tear apart cafes, cars, and the road. It's a pretty fiery battle that Richard seems to know he's at risk of losing due to Namor's sheer strength, but Reed takes the win in the end, exclaiming in a heroic monologue that his anger isn't actually directed at Namor, but at himself for not being a good husband to Susan throughout the years. It's a pretty epic battle with some realistic and possibly relatable motivations, giving it a rightful spot on our list. Coming in at number 6 is Namor again versus Daredevil this time. In this instance, Namor is being arrested as if the human legal system is any match for a superhero, and to represent him, he decides to hire the blind Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. Basically, Namor is angry because he wants a place on land for his people who have only ever lived under the sea. In fact, he actually wants to sue the entire human race for denying them their birthright, as he calls it. Matt, being the pragmatic lawyer that he is, simply acknowledges that there's just no legal precedent for suing the whole human race. This obvious and very astute point throws Namor the Submariner into a rage that he takes to the streets without using the door. And in this moment is actually when Daredevil first wears the red suit that we all know, and it's in preparation for his fight with Namor, where Daredevil is off to protect humanity from an outraged underwater superhero. So this fight between two superheroes is heated by an external issue that forces them to clash. In so many words, Daredevil's sense of duty is clashing against Namor's rage. They take the fight directly to the streets, busting down lampposts, crumbling brick walls, and even taking over a wrecking ball at one point. The fight ends with Namor winning, naturally, claiming that Daredevil had been the most courageous of all his foes, at least, despite having faced off against the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. And that's a pretty good accolade for Daredevil if I've got to say anything about it.
Number 5, Scarlet Witch. This was a weird romance that involved Scarlet Witch kind of forgetting who she really was in order to fall for Victor. The two fell in love fast, though under false pretenses. And although at first we thought Dr. Doom was just trying to manipulate Wanda, he later insisted this was not the case and that he really loved her. And just as we thought maybe this could actually work out in some weird way, Doom then lashed out, seemingly implying he never loved Wanda, and in fact he thought she was weak and he had been using and manipulating her the whole time. Although it's more likely that Doom was actually just lashing out because he felt some shame, maybe he had a broken heart. He mistreated Wanda harshly, even when she still tried to help him despite his betrayal, and insisting that she was weak and that he had only been using her weakness against her to get her power. Needless to say, that was pretty much the end of their relationship. That great revelation, and the bizarre revelation where Doom claimed that apparently every bad thing Wanda has ever done was actually not of her own doing, but was caused by Doom himself. Wait, what? Number 4, Mary Jane Watson. Again. Another weird Spidey pairing with Mary Jane also comes to us from The Ultimates, because Spider-Man's clones all had his memories. They were just all basically into MJ. And not just Jessica. All the clones were meant to have their memories wiped so that they could develop their own identities and also be used in the process, but they escaped the facility where they were kept before this could happen. As a result, Kane, who also here sports an even creepier version of his half-melted face, ends up trapping Mary Jane and kidnapping her, claiming it's all out of love for her. Oh, if someone does that to you, you just need to get out of there. Seriously. Which is what MJ tries to do. She's like, no, let me out! Initially, she thinks that he's Peter from a silhouette, but then when she sees his face, she's horrified and knows something is definitely wrong, and this probably isn't her Peter Parker. Of course, she is right. Kane, out of love for MJ, wants to protect her by making her stronger. To do this, he exposes her to the Oz formula, which ends up turning her into a big red monster temporarily. Bet you thought I was going to say a big red dog, but no, that's Clifford. Fortunately, the real Peter Parker shows up and is able to use his presence to calm MJ down, transforming her back into a normal teenage girl. Well, normal. I mean, I feel like she just went through some stuff and she might transform again, but sort of normal. Mostly normal. Number 3. Eddie Brock and Ashley Kafka. This one comes to us not from the comics, but instead from the Spider-Man animated series out of the 90s. Here, Dr. Ashley Kafka was the person treating Eddie Brock during his time at Ravencroft Institute for the Criminally Insane. Eddie insisted that he was Venom, but Dr. Kafka believed that he was just delusional and that stress had basically caused him to lash out and to believe that he was the villain Venom, when he actually wasn't. This relationship was weird on the premise that it was a patient and doctor relationship turned romance, and the fact that both fell in love with one another while Ashley kinda thought Eddie was imagining being Venom and was at the time insane. So yeah. It got even weirder when Carnage got involved and caused a bunch of chaos that caused Eddie to save the day once reunited with the Venom symbiote. In the end, they were unable to be together as Venom got sucked into a magical portal in order to save Ashley. Don't you just hate it when a magical portal and multiple villains prevent you from being with the one you love? I know I do. Number 2. Mia Flores. One of the most random when it comes to Peter's interactions with women. Mia Flores kissed Peter while he was out with Carly Cooper, Harry Osborn, and Lily Hollister. Like, she just randomly grabbed him and then kissed him. She didn't even introduce herself first. She's just like, I'm gonna kiss you. I'm like, oh my goodness. Peter did not sign up for that. This was all part of a ploy for Mia to basically get in with Harry's entourage, wanting to get closer to him. But the weird part of the whole interaction was just how stalkery Mia was acting during this whole thing. It was like she was out to kill. She was like, Peter, I'm coming for you in this club. And Peter, rather than just confront Mia and be like, I'm really not into you and no thank you, decided to of course jump out a window instead. Because that's how Peter Parker likes to solve problems sometimes. This was less of a relationship and more a weird attempt at a romantic and sexy moment from Mia, but it's just really awkward and strange, and I felt it was so weird that I needed to include it, even though it's not a full relationship. Technically. Number 1. Jessica Carradine. Remember that time Ben Reilly pined after the daughter of the man who murdered Uncle Ben? No? Well, take a seat, cause yeah, that happened. Jessica Carradine is the daughter of Dennis Carradine, the name that would later be given to the man who killed Peter Parker's Uncle Ben. She grew up with a hatred of Spider-Man, believing that the hero was actually to blame for the death of both Ben and her father. She believed that her dad was basically framed by Spidey. Needless to say, she and Ben's relationship is catastrophically ruined when she realizes that he is Spider-Man. I don't even know why Ben would go for this if he was aware of Jessica's name and her ties to the man who murdered Uncle Ben, but hey, I guess it wasn't technically his uncle since he's just Peter's clone. One of Peter's clones. It should be noted that Jessica did eventually come to terms with the fact that her father was actually the guilty party, but she still couldn't be with Ben because she was then just too worried for his safety, since he often puts himself in various dangerous situations as Spidey.
Coming in at number 8, we've got another Avenger fighting a less than worthy variant with Captain America versus Hydra Cap. After an alternate Steve Rogers that had grown up as a devout follower of Hydra wound up taking over the entire United States in a particularly controversial Marvel storyline, the world was overjoyed to see the real Steve Rogers return and finally put this imposter in his place. Literally bursting forth out of a shard of the cosmic cube, the true Steve Rogers was able to fight back against this twisted version of everything he stood for and eventually break his armor down down with a little help from the worthiness deciding Mjolnir. At number 7, we've got to go with the classic storyline of Hulk versus the Maestro. Bruce Banner often has to face off against different mental versions of the Hulk inside his head, but this alternate version of himself from a post-apocalyptic future is the real deal. Naming himself Maestro after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter, this version of the Hulk has become far stronger than the Hulk's usual starting strength, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. I'd say that's a little bit of overkill though. Coming in at number 6, we have the Battle of the Batmen with Tim Drake versus Jason Todd. Now, the many Robins of the DC universe are no strangers to occasionally squabbling amongst themselves, but when both Tim Drake and Jason Todd are dressed as Batman and beating the hell out of each other in the middle of the Batcave, well, that's just dramatic enough to earn a spot on this list. During a period of time in which Bruce Wayne is believed to have been killed by Darkseid, Jason Todd had taken over the cowl and cape and become a much deadlier Dark Knight. Not wanting Bruce's no-killing rule to be abandoned, the Bat family tried many ways to get Jason to stand down, before finally culminating in a Batman vs. Batman battle that shook the Bat family to its core.
Number 5. Venom and Lee Price. Lee Price really messed up Venom. Their relationship was weird in the worst of ways. Venom bonded to Lee when it was desperate for a host, but Lee ended up taking control of the symbiote and using it to do all kinds of terrible things and kill people. Not that the symbiote hadn't killed people before, I mean it had, but the huge difference here was this was very much against Venom's will, and Price would often use it to target people regardless of their alignment, which Venom has always been conflicted about, while with Eddie it was against hurting innocents for the most part. But Lee didn't care about what Venom wanted or its feelings. Basically, this relationship between Price and Venom, while not inherently romantic explicitly, was meant to symbolize the most toxic kind of romantic relationship. An abusive one. Number 4. Shalabal. Okay, I couldn't put this one in the top spot because it wasn't real. Just one of Doom's many ploys to trick others into helping him in a plot to destroy his arch nemesis, the team known as the Fantastic Four. Here, Dr. Doom pretended to marry Shalabal and pretended that he had wiped her memories of the Silver Surfer, when the Surfer ultimately found out after crash landing in Latveria and seeing posters celebrating the reign of their new queen, Doom's new bride, who in reality was not the real Shalabal, but an imposter created to resemble Silver Surfer's aka Norrin Radd's long lost love. There are so many questions I have in regards to how Dr. Doom was able to pull this plan off, but hey, it's a comic and it's Dr. Doom, so I'm just willing to let any queries go unanswered here and just accept that this worked. Even with this not being the real deal Shalabal, the fact that Dr. Doom created this whole ploy and relationship just to destroy the Fantastic Four is pretty bizarre and intense, and it's also part of the reason why I think so many of us fans love him. Number 3. Louise Kennedy. The story of Louise Kennedy comes with a pretty powerful moral. Never date Kane Parker. Louise was a cop in Salt Lake City who had turned dirty and was on the criminal drug lord Vincent Tannen's payroll. She and Kane shared a night of passion, and both had feelings for the other. Both became this light in the darkness for one another, this hope that they could be redeemed or saved or become better. After Kane found out about Louise's betrayal, however, he ended up being forced to confront her and eventually killed her as a result. After snapping her neck, he left his mark on her, burning her face with the mark of Kane, shocking Ben Reilly, who was actually there to witness all of this, and whom he'd actually saved in killing Louise. It's a very terrible end to a relationship. Let me just burn your face after you're already dead. Number 2. Sandy Bidwell. Who is Sandy Bidwell? Well, she is a woman that Doom very well severely messed up when he was in college. Doom tells us about what happened with Sandy, although he himself doesn't recall her name, in Ed Brubaker's Books of Doom. He remembers being inebriated and an attractive woman coming on to him as he bragged about Latveria and his promising future while on campus. She kissed him, pushing him up against a tree, but when he looked into her eyes, he didn't like the emptiness that he saw in them, which ignited something in him, a fury and anger, and he started to strangle her, attacking Sandy. We later find out that she tried to report Victor, but his military connections handled it, working with the school administration and the government to cover it up, hide it, and force Sandy out of school, paying off her family. Of course, Victor didn't know any of this, but still, what was that? It was terrible. Number 1. Valeria. This was a pretty sweet romance initially. Valeria was Doom's first love, and they both really did love one another. But in the end, Doom's ambition got in the way of their romance. Years later, Doom actually tracked Valeria down, confessing how much he still loved her and how much she meant to him. Before we realized what he was really doing, Valeria meant so much to him that she made a fitting price for what Doom really wanted: some sweet, sweet enchanted armor. Comic readers watched on in horror as Valeria was transformed into Doom's armor, her skin peeling away, her soul doomed, but at least she'd always be by his side. Jeez, remind me to never fall in love with Dr. Doom.
Number 7. Captain America and Sharon Carter. We go back now again to the Civil War comic book event where Captain America was killed by Sharon Carter. Yeah, after Crossbones sniped him, Agent 13, who was also at the time Cap's girlfriend, delivered the final bullet from a much, much closer point. Well, it turns out it wasn't Sharon who was doing the work, really. I mean, the classic brainwashing made this defeat happen. Dr. Faustus, yeah, this causes a whole chain of events. I mean, for starters, Bucky decides at that point that he should go and try and kill Iron Man, blaming him for the death of Steve Rogers. And then Falcon also goes after his own lead. Now, Tony ended up showing Bucky the letter that Cap wrote about how he should be the next Captain America, and Bucky agrees to take the spot only if he can operate solo. No shield, no nothing, I'm not working for you, I'm not punching in, I'm just doing my thing. And to think that all this came to a climax after Steve's girlfriend, of all people, was the one to deliver the fatal blow, it's just heartbreaking, and it's something that never should have happened. Number 6. Squirrel Girl and Dr. Doom. So Squirrel Girl has beaten some big bads in the Marvel Universe before. She's taken down MODOK, Mandarin, and at one point Thanos. It's becoming a running joke by now, but one defeat that always shocks me is when a bunch of squirrels took down Victor Von Doom. Just a bunch of squirrels. Yeah, it happened back in the 90s in Marvel Superheroes issue 8. So she bumps into Iron Man and then starts to show what she can do, alright? She's trying to give him a run for his money in order to show how rough and tough she really can be. So she shows him her mutant powers, like jumping, hopping, climbing, all like a squirrel. It's amazing. He's fascinated. She's even pumped to show him that she can also sound like a squirrel too, which, I mean, if you can do it, I would love to see that. Fair. But the most impressive of all these abilities has to be when an abundance of squirrels is commanded to jump onto Stark, and then enter Dr. Doom. Doom comes in and he interrupts Stark's electronics. So, in order to save Tony at this point, she needs to send a horde of squirrels onto the Doom ship. Just a horde of squirrels. As if they don't have, wives and kids to go back home. They have nuts to store and eat. They have things to do, right? And voila, Stark is free thanks to the insane squirrel posse. Then the rodents get their fur on Dr. Doom and he's forced to retreat and jump into nearby water. It's the best panel ever. He's like, squirrels? No way, man, I'm out of here. Good riddance, peace. And then he literally runs away and jumps. Like he's out of there. He wants nothing to do with that. One of those times you're happy the hero won, but like, squirrels. We have a lot of squirrels up here in Canada. I don't think they can take on Dr. Doom. They're pretty fat.
Number 5. Deborah Whitman. This is an interesting relationship considering it was very one-sided. Deborah Whitman was a secretary at Empire State University where Peter was a student. She pined after Peter, and although at times it seemed like Peter didn't even notice her existence, the two started dating. Needless to say, they didn't make for a great partnership due to the fact that Peter kept having to bail on their dates to attend to heroic business as Spider-Man, but didn't really want to confide in Deborah, so he just gave her a ton of really lame excuses. Eventually, the two broke up, but Deborah remained obsessed with him and began to fantasize and hallucinate that he was Spider-Man, in essence making the ultimate excuse for his behavior while also idolizing him. When her therapist approached Peter after learning of this and asked him to wear a Spider-Man suit to help shock her out of her fantasy, he refused to do so, which obviously the therapist was like, well, that's weird, but okay. Deborah, becoming delusional, later ended up in a toxic relationship as a result of all of this, making excuses for her then husband. Fortunately, Peter did eventually confess to her that he was Spider-Man, which helped Deborah to move forward and woke her to the truth of her current relationship, motivating her to get a divorce. Thank goodness. Still pretty crazy. Number 4. Venom and Beck Underwood. This one was pretty weird because Beck seemed to be super into it at first. Well, I mean for a time anyways. Like most people, she ended up ultimately being turned off by the whole combo deal of Venom and Eddie Brock together. In the end, the whole dating of both the symbiote and Eddie ended up just being too much for her. It got pretty strange too when Beck asked Eddie about his relationship with the suit and wanted to make sure it was healthy. One of the things that I actually didn't really like about her was how she got kind of a bit judgy when she felt the need to seek clarity on if Eddie was really enamored with Venom because he just hadn't found an adequate and committed woman to settle down with. Let Eddie love his alien suit, I say. Just let it happen. But I totally understand that it can be a lot for someone to get involved with both Eddie Brock and, you know, the alien that is Venom. That's a lot. In the end, the two ended up parting on amicable terms, with Beck giving both Eddie and Venom one last kiss and hug. And Venom was also super heartbroken about it. They were like, no, please don't leave us. Number 3. Amara Pereira. Amara Pereira was a brilliant doctor who ended up discovering a cure for the mutant gene, but one that she dared not produce, knowing what kind of unrest and political and sociological warfare it would likely create. She dated Tony Stark briefly before he faked his own death. When he returned, she was no longer interested, feeling he had betrayed her by letting her think he was dead when he was not, which I mean, fair enough. She then ended up becoming a reluctant ally, confidant, friend, and implied lover to Dr. Doom during the events of the infamous Iron Man series, where Victor Von Doom took up the mantle of Iron Man during Tony's absence. At the end of that series, it was revealed that Amara was pregnant, although it was later briefly mentioned by Dr. Doom that their unborn child did not make it to term and thus was never born. I love when other writers do that. They just come in and they're like, this never happened, it's fine. Don't worry about it. While this relationship actually felt pretty authentic, it was definitely still odd and random. But it also happened at a pretty strange and unique time in Victor's life, so yeah, I guess, okay. Number 2. Eddie Brock and Anne Wang. And Venom? This relationship basically got super weird in a bad way for Anne when Venom got involved. Anne and Eddie were originally married, but after Eddie lost his dad and his job, Anne couldn't take sort of the dark path that he was headed down and left him. This of course only put Eddie in an even darker place, and then he found the Venom symbiote. Together, their combined hatred for Spider-Man turned them into a villain, but Eddie still longed for Anne and wanted to make things right. They kind of ended up back together for a bit, but this also made things worse for Anne, who was left traumatized and feeling violated after bonding with Venom herself. She didn't like the person that she and the symbiote were together, Venom, nor what it did to Eddie. And it was all this trauma that actually caused Anne to be unable to leave her apartment for months, and later resulted in her taking her own life after Eddie and Venom confronted her once more and were super clueless when it came to just how fragile Anne's emotional and mental state was at the time. Because Spider-Man was also present at the time and also freaking Anne out though, Eddie of course continued to blame him for his problems and for the death of his ex-wife. Number 1. Symbrock. This is really the love story for the ages, but is also one of the strangest ones out there. Eddie falling in love with a symbiotic alien suit who it turns out is its own living entity, and vice versa. This is confirmed in the comics as the two have expressed their love for one another and even at times bickered like a married couple. They also call each other things like love and dear, so yeah, that's pretty coupley in my opinion. Not only that, but Eddie has helped Venom deliver children, even though those children are technically kinda just Venom's who reproduces asexually. But still, Venom considered Eddie to basically be the father of their children, so yeah. And also, Eddie helped the symbiote to deliver, in essence, their symbiote child together, Sleeper, bonding with Venom while it was in essence giving birth. This labor was a hard one, and Eddie bonded with Venom to help it through and to help stabilize his partner, not just in this labor, but also in heroics, crime, and in a way, love. Aside from this moment, we have seen tons of other moments where the pair chose to be together and support one another in a pretty intimate way. At the end of the day, these two together are one of the weirdest and sweetest romances on this list.